Good morning. Today we're going to be talking about writing one-step and two-step inequalities. So let's begin. Chase made at least $240 this week at his job. If he earned $12 per hour, how many hours did he work? So in the first box, it asks us to identify variables and what it represents. So what here is an unknown variable? Hour. So right here, H, which stands for hour. In box 2, it says to identify keywords to determine the symbol. A key word here in this word problem is at least. Thinking back to Wednesday when you made a list of words, what word does at least fit in? What sign? Greater than or equal to. So go ahead and write that sign in this box number 2. Third step, we need to write the inequality and solve. So let's go back to our word problem. Chase made at least $240. So we're going to write our inequality sign and we're going to put $240 after it because that's how much he made total. He could make that or he can make more than that. That's what this at least word is saying. Then it says if he earned $12 per hour, how many hours did he work? So we know that per means to multiply. An hour is stood by H. So we can represent that by 12H. Make sure you have that written in box 3. Now we need to solve it. Remember, inequalities, you solve it the same way as you solve one-step and multi-step equations. So you can make your little tracks, but do not put an equal sign because now instead of an equal sign, we have the greater than or equal to sign that's acting as our equal sign. Now, in order to isolate this variable h, we need to divide by 12. And whatever we do to one side, we need to do to the other. That cancels out and h is left. Then we just bring down our greater than or equal to sign because we did not divide by a negative number. And then $240 divided by 12 is 20. So we can restate this as Chase worked at least 20 hours. And we need to put that keyword at least because that is what this sign is telling us. All right, let's go to number 2. The quotient of a number, n3, increased by 12 is greater than negative 6. What is the number? So let's look at this. We need to identify our variables and what it represents. What is our variable here? A number, and we can represent that as x. So x, which is standing for a number. Next, we need to identify keywords to determine the symbol. Let's go back in our word problem. The quotient of a number, n3, increased by 12 is greater than negative 6. Our key word here is greater than. And the sign that fits greater than is this. It's not greater than or equal, it's just greater than, so it does not have a line underneath it. Now, pause this video and go ahead and try setting up this inequality and solving it. And we are back. Did you get that x is greater than negative 54? Let's talk about how we got that. So, we set up as the quotient of a number, which we said was represented by x, n3. So how do we show x and 3, the quotient of x and 3? Yes, it's dividing, so it's x over 3, because quotient means to divide. Now it says that it was increased by 12. Increased means what operation? addition. So we put plus 12. And then it says is greater than, so there's our greater than sign, negative 6. So it comes after the greater than sign. Now we get to solve it. What's our goal with solving inequalities and equations? We want to get the variable alone. So first we need to subtract 12 to cancel out, and whatever we do to one side, we do to the other. So when we bring over negative 12, we add them, because same signs, add and keep, and we get negative 18. So now we have x over 3 is greater than negative 18. Is the variable all alone? No. So we need to get it alone. And by doing that, we have to do the inverse operation. If we're dividing, what is the inverse operation? Multiplication. So we multiply by 3. And whatever we do to one side, we do to the other. So that cancels out and we just get x. And we're not dividing by or multiplying by a negative number, so we keep our sign the same. And then negative 18 times 3 is negative 54. So now the last part is we restate the solution in a sentence. So remember, we go back into our sentence, we go back into the question and make it a statement. So it says, what is the number? So you answer it saying the number is negative 54. Awesome. So now pause this video and I want you to try number 3 and number 4 on your own. All right, and we are back. So let's go ahead and go over this. So number 3, AT&T charges their customers $145 for 15 gigabytes of data and $10 for each additional gigabyte of data. If a bill was no less than $205, how many gigabytes of data were used? So the first step is we identify our variable. So it should be G, and G stands for gigabytes because that is what we are looking for in our question. How many gigabytes? Step 2, identify keywords to determine the symbol. I found that the keyword was no less than, and that stands for so our sign is the greater than or equal to sign. How are we doing so far? All right, so now we have step 1 and 2 done. So step 3 is now we write the inequality. So we're just translating our words into an inequality. So AT&T charges their customers $145 for 15 gigabytes. So we know so far that we are charged $145 for 15 gigabytes. So 145. And then it says $10 for each additional gigabyte of data. So we are adding because it says additional. So we are adding on. So that's where that comes from. Then it says $10 for each additional gigabyte. Each means to multiply. So that is why we represent it as 10G, because that's saying $10 for each additional gigabyte. But we don't know our gigabytes. We have to figure that out. And then it says, and it was no less than, so that's why we have our symbol for no less than, $205. And it comes after the less, greater than or equal to sign. All right, now we solve it. In order to get G alone, we first need to move over. In order to get G by itself, we first need to move over our constant. So we subtract 145, and that cancels out. And whatever we do to one side, we do to the other. So we subtract 145. Then we bring down our 10G. Here's 10G. We bring down our greater than or equal to sign, and then we subtract, and we get 60. But G is still not alone, so we need to get it alone. So we're multiplying, and the opposite of multiplying is dividing. So we divide by 10, and whatever we do to one side, we do to the other. So we did not divide by a negative number, so our sign still stays the same way. So we have G is greater than or equal to 6. So now, step 4 is we need to restate the solution. Remember, we go back up to the question and answer it. So it says how many gigabytes of data were used. And I wrote at least 6 gigabytes of data were used. How did we do? Awesome, yay! All right, let's go to number 4. Now, the first step is to identify our variable and what it represents. So here it says 3 times the difference between a number and 8 is at most -6. What is the number? So our variable that we're looking for is n, which stands for number, which I have here. Step 2, we identify key words to determine the symbol. So I found that it said at most. And at most is a less than or equal to word. So here we go. Next step, we need to write the inequality and solve. So we're just translating our words. 3 times the difference between a number and 8. So times means to multiply. 3 times, so we can represent that as 3. And since there's another operation about to happen, we are going to put parentheses. That's a parenthesis phrase. So now we have 3 times the difference between a number, which we said was n, and 8. So that's why we have n minus 8. Then the next word is at most. So we put our sign that we found here, at most. And it's at most -6. So that goes after the inequality sign. Now we just need to get n alone. But first on this side, we have distributive property. So we need to do that. So 3 times n is 3n. 3 times -8 is -24. And then bring down everything else. Is at most, our symbol here, and -6. Now we need to get n alone. So we first need to move over the constant. So we add to cancel it out. And whatever we do to one side, we do to the other. So now we have 3n is at most 18, but n is still not alone. So we need to divide it by 3 because this is multiplying. So the inverse of multiplication is division. And whatever we do to one side, we do to the other. So now we have n is at most 6. And our sign did not change because we did not divide by a negative number. So part 4 says to restate the solution in a sentence. So remember, we go back up to our question. What is the number? And I put the number is at most, because we need to use the key word that goes along with the symbol we're using, is at most 6. Now go ahead and flip over to the back to the next page. And let's look at 5 together. The combined cost of a new phone and case is a minimum of $246. If the case costs $39.50, what is the cost of the phone? So our variable here is P for phone. Okay? So now, the next step is we need to identify key words to determine the symbol. The combined cost of a new phone and case is a minimum of, so there's our key word, minimum of. And a minimum of is a greater than or equal to word. So the sign is going to be this. How are we doing so far? Okay, good. Let's go to 3, which we write the inequality. So the combined cost of a new phone and case is a minimum of $246. So this $246 is going to come after our inequality sign because it is the total cost, the combined cost. So we know this so far. Okay. Now we need to write on this side. It says if the case costs $39.50. So we know how much the case costs, so that's going to go here. but we're looking